Welcome to the Odds Breakers, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
All right, welcome back to Podcast 40 of 2019. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can tweet me at OBKiev or tweet us at the Odds Breakers. Follow us on social media /the Odds Breakers. My friends, we have a fantastic episode for you today. Chris Fallica is back to go over season conference futures and some win totals for every college football conference. Super excited to bring him on and see if we can find some big value for this year's college football season. This episode is being sponsored by Kelly in Vegas Proxy Service. If you need a proxy to place your contest plays, you do not have to live in Nevada or by Las Vegas, or even if you do and just don't feel like having to go every Sunday or Saturday to the casino, please visit proxy.kellyinvegas.com. She covers the main contests here. She covers the Westgate Super Contest. That's it. Last year's winner took home $1.4 million. It's a $1,500 buy-in. Contestants get to pick 5 NFL games against the spread every single week. And if you win, that's going to set you, buddy. So definitely check that one out. That's kind of the premier best NFL the Super Bowl of sports capping in a way. Obviously, lots goes into NFL games, but this is the main one. The Gold Nuggets got a big one too coming up. It's the Ultimate Football Challenge. They've been doing that a few years. They are $1,000 entry fee. Top 20 finishers get paid. And there's a big grand prize for that as well. You pick 7 games against the spread. Could be NCAA or NFL. So you can actually kind of mix that one up for the Golden Nugget. And the Circa contest, the new Circa's got a big contest. That's $1,000 entry fee and $1.5 million in total prizes, $50,000 in quarterly prizes throughout the season. This contest is similar to the Super Contest where you pick 5 NFL games against the spread and awarded points for each one that is correct. Half a point for every single push. So make sure you check out Kelly in Vegas to get into these big contests. They're a ton of fun this year. I've done them and I'm doing one again. Kelly is absolutely the best. Should you be looking for a sports book, please visit mybookie.ag and use the promo code TheOddsBreakers for a 100% sign-up bonus up to $1,000. Terms and conditions apply. Such a great bonus they have to get you going in the football season. If you haven't tried MyBookie, they have a very friendly sports betting site. If you'd like to help us out and sponsor our podcasts weekly, we would love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, and become a member. For $17.99 a month, you will get access to some of our sports betting pages as well as my plays and premium plays that are made before the line moves. For $2 more, you can have all of that and become a patron subscriber. Please do that if you want to get the podcast a little bit early. And if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. And I just like to say there's a lot of patrons and Odds Breakers members that's been reaching out to me this last month saying such nice things, having a great summer here. Had a great year, up 21 units in college football last year, already up in the preseason over 60%. Just want to say thank you guys for saying such nice things. Really appreciate that. But I also appreciate all you listeners out there anyway. You don't have to be a member. We do free plays as well. Love you guys as well. We're nothing without you guys. And just want to give you all the appreciation that you deserve. We already have a play out, a premium play that we are sharing with the public. That's why we call it premium shared on theoddsbreakers.com, or you can just check out our Twitter at the Oddsbreakers. We sent it out on Sunday, August 18th. It's already a play for week 1A, the very first weekend of college football when there's only a few games. Florida's playing, Hawaii's playing against Arizona. So make sure you get on that play early because I suspect some serious line movement on this one. The last thing I want to say is that there's more and more of you sports bettors out there, which is a great thing. But we always have to remember, we always have to respect the sports books and the lines that they create. These sports books are in business for a reason, and it's because they make money. And they make money off people that are not properly disciplined and do not use the proper fundamentals of sports betting. Like I always say, these casinos, these sports books, they don't build themselves.
Well, I've been with the best, and I beat the best. I've retired more men than Social Security.
If you'd like some more information on some of the disciplines and some of the fundamentals of sports betting, check out my article at theoddsbreakers.com, Introduction to Sports Betting 101. It's probably a 20 to 30 minute read, but it will easily explain everything you need to know about how to keep this thing fun, how to have proper discipline, and how to have a great time while sports betting and understanding the numbers. Speaking of understanding the numbers, there's no better person out there than we can have to break down these college football futures than ESPN's The Bear, Chris Fallica. And let's get him on to discuss college football 2019 futures. Now I am excited to introduce one of the most well-known and polished handicappers that we see every year. You know him from his fierce takes on ESPN's College Game Day, The Daily Wager, and his own podcast, Stanford Steve and the Bear. I'm very happy to welcome back Chris Fallica to the Odds Breakers. You can follow him on Twitter at Chris, Fallica. Chris, last time we spoke was in May or June, May, I believe, for the Preakness Stakes. How's your summer going?
Summer was, we had some ups, we had some downs. Mostly downs at Saratoga lately from a handicapping point of view, but first couple of weeks were good, but lately it's been kind of bad. But no, summer stuff was great. We had my wife and I took a nice trip over to the south of France for a couple of weeks. I was able to watch Liverpool win the Champions League, which was awesome. And but here we are. We're getting ready to get back at it. Summer is officially over. That's for sure.
That's right, man. Did you find anything to bet on out there in Europe?
I did find the horse racing off track handicapping place in Avignon. It was funny. We were walking by, and I was like, everywhere I go, I find it. So my wife actually did take a picture of me in front of it. I did not go in and play anything though while I was over there too. My only condition for the entire trip was to make sure I was in position to watch the Champions League final at 9:00 that night, and I indeed was.
Oh, absolutely, my man. Especially when you're with family and stuff, you don't want to overextend, as we all have probably done in the past, my man. Well, that's awesome. I'm glad you had a great trip. But we got some football coming up, and it's already this weekend. Little Birdie told me you might be in Florida for this one.
Yeah, we'll be down there in Orlando this week for the Canes and the Gators, and I'm curious to see both teams how especially how Miami will look offensively, and how Florida overcomes some of the people they have to replace in the secondary and on the offensive line. So certainly a game where I wouldn't necessarily expect a ton of points. I know the totals come down from like 50 or 50 to 47 and a half or so, but really looking forward to it's interesting. This is usually our week where all the guys come into the studio and we have an hour-long preview show in Bristol in a nice controlled studio, and we're in and out. But however, this year we're going to blow it out. 3 hours, actually take it on the road because we had a huge game to kick off the season that night.
Oh my goodness, it's going to be nice and warm. Absolutely. So I'm sure you're going to be prepared for that, man. Everyone knows you as a trends guy. Well, definitely you post a lot of them on Twitter. And I thought this might be a good question to ask you because even for me, and I've been betting over 15 years, I don't know how to answer this question. And a lot of people ask, when's a good time to jump on a trend? When is it too early? Is it ever too late and you fear the books have adjusted? I think I might have an answer to this, but I thought I'd ask you first.
I don't know. It's a weird question. It's a good question because while the trends I throw out there, I mean, they may indicate some certain things. I don't know if there is a certain point where some of them may regress and come back to the mean or whatever. But I do think the trends that I try and put out there are really situational type things where we're dealing with a head coach in an underdog type situation or in a big favorite type situation. It's just some of the stuff where you've got coaches who, when they are an underdog or certainly a big underdog, you know that they are alive. You look at David Cutcliffe, you look at Patrick Fitzgerald, you look at Mark D'Antonio for the most part, although that trend's kind of died a little bit, I think, the last couple of years. But when those guys are big dogs, they're worth looking at. Now, on the other hand, like when USC is an underdog getting points. Well, SC's only won once under Clay Helton where they've been a dog. So there are things like that I think are worth looking at. But a lot of times they're more just kind of interesting. At heart, I'm a researcher first, and that's really how I come up with a lot of stuff. I'm just out of curiosity and just kind of incorporate some of the Vegas spreads and angle stuff type in there. So when I fire out stuff like that, I always preface it with now, not necessarily for use to bet on a game, but just something to maybe file away or maybe included in some of your handicapping if possible. Just an interesting type historical type note than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. I think yours are more systems because you're using other variables to your trend. It's not just like, did LSU cover is 8-2 against spread? You have something that has to do with the coach or the place they're playing and things like that. That makes it a little bit more of a system. I suppose the way I would answer,
and I think too, sorry, because it's just with college because there's so much turnover. I think a lot of them have to more do with coaches who are the program for, because these players are really only there most of 3 years now at best. So players come and go, coaches are there, rivalries stay the same. So like if you're looking at some rivalry related stuff, like that stuff's kind of inherent. But I think the coaches are really the way to look at maybe certain rankings within certain if you're looking like AP ranked teams, maybe in certain roles. I think there are a lot of things that I can come over. So I'm sorry to cut you off.
Oh, no, that's absolutely right. I think maybe when the general public starts jumping on a trend, it might be time to back off. It's that when it's a little bit too well known. But I like you, just look for consistency. It's not the end all be all in your handicap, but just look for consistency. Is it the same coach, same quarterback, and things like that. So 100% agree with you there. Next question, Wisconsin. My team, my Badgers, play Notre Dame the next 2 seasons on neutral fields. Then they scheduled 2 years after that. They play Washington State at a home and home. And then they just scheduled Alabama in 2024 and 2025 for a home and home as well. I want to ask you, what are the pros and cons to this kind of non-conference scheduling?
The pro is if you win the game, you have a massive deposit in the bank in terms of recognition and quality win and offsetting a loss. And you get your fans excited about playing a big non-conference game, which obviously helps when you're selling tickets and looking for donations to your booster club, and the stadium's going to be filled. The con is don't lose it. You say no, and you laugh, but it's true. I think the committee. I've been pretty outspoken about this. Until the committee rewards a team for playing a difficult schedule and having 2 losses, I wouldn't do it. Look at Penn State a couple of years ago. Penn State won the Big Ten, had a win, beat 3 top 10 teams, I think it was, or three top 8 teams. So they chose to play Pitt in the non-conference. That was the year Pitt beat Clemson, by the way. Pitt was a good team that year. Penn State chose to play Pitt in the non-conference. They lost. Penn State lost to Michigan early in the year. It gave them their second loss. Then Nittany Lions won the Big Ten, beat Ohio State, beat Wisconsin, a bunch of great wins that year. They had 2 losses and probably I think, had a better resume than Washington, who won the Pac-12 with 1 loss, had a terrible non-conference, and the best team they played that year was USC, and USC went to Seattle and won. Well, you had the 1-loss team go to the playoff. Last year, I think Georgia, as a 2-loss team, should have been in the playoff over Oklahoma. The committee, we always talked about like numbers and math and how do you pick teams and tournament and everything. And the BCS was terrible because it was solely numbers. We want coaches. We want a committee. Well, here's the problem with ex-coaches and ex-players and people who live that life. The ultimate arbiter in their mind, growing up from the time they played youth football to the time they coached their final game, was 1 loss. 1-loss record ultimately determined how good you are. And until you start to get a different mentality on the committee, that's what it's going to be, 1 loss. So I hate it as a fan and someone who loves the sport and someone who wants to see these big games in late August and early September. I would love to see great games, but you know what? It hasn't proven to be worth anything for anyone who has lost that game. Why take the chance in playing someone and losing? Right now, it was great. It was great for Ohio State the year they went to Norman and beat Oklahoma and got in, but it wasn't great for them the year they lost at home. If you lose, you've really hindered your chances of making the playoffs. And that's not. You are encouraging team by not rewarding the team or giving them an extra little benefit of a doubt for a difficult schedule. You are saying, well, you know what? The 1 loss is more important to go out and play somebody that wins. So that's my first tirade of the year on the fallacy of strength of schedule and how it matters. And the committee doesn't even have a reputable strength of schedule formula anyway. So it's a complete joke. So they need. I guess the thing that bothers me the most is these numbers and these metrics exist. The strength of record, good strength of schedule numbers that factor in time, where you play the game, home road. Are you coming off of an idle week? Is your opponent coming off of an idle week? All things that like matter. Like the committee will just look at like, oh yeah, well, what's the combined 1-loss record of your opponents? But it's not taking into account anything to do with opponent strength in terms of efficiency or site of game. None of that. So all these numbers exist, whether it's from ESPN or other entities out there that have their own models. Basically, anything is better than what the committee is using in terms of strength of schedule. So,
I agree.
They can do a lot better.
And that's why we have power ratings out there. Everyone knew Georgia was in the top 3. Last year, it's just, and if you actually went by a blended Vegas power rating of some sharp players, even a couple of the more public ones out there that I like, I think you get it right a lot because of the metrics you say, the statistics, the efficiencies, the ISO PPP, the things like that really judge and tell you how good a team's in factoring strength schedule. So I absolutely agree with you there. I think there's a good, a bad, and the ugly for Wisconsin in this situation. The bad is, they could lose the game and it might hurt them. So they might have 1 loss and then a Pac-12 team that's undefeated that had a cake schedule might jump them in the playoffs if they lose to Alabama in 2024. I guess the good would be the recruiting. Will they possibly pull some big recruits that might not want to compete at Alabama or Clemson or Georgia? Could they do that just because they're going to be on that national TV and they know Wisconsin's a pretty respectable program? As we know, Wisconsin doesn't hit the top 20 in recruiting. So will it help them in that situation is what I wonder. Is that the good, right? And then the ugly. Yeah. And the ugly is them getting their asses kicked. Getting blown out that not only hurts them, it might even hurt the conference. And so, that's the risk that you take. But I guess in 2024, 2025, we'll see if Nick Saban's there. and there's definitely a lot of schools of thought to that. But what you said kind of brings me into the last question before we get into these conference futures is, does college football have it right now with a 14 playoff, or do you think you think their expansion or contraction could help the sport itself when it comes to overall ratings? You got to think of the ratings and top recruits being spread out a little bit more.
I love it. The first part of that question, I love it for. I think it should be hard to get into the playoff. I don't think it should be one of those. Hey, they knew you had 5 Power 5 conference champions and Notre Dame. You knew that when you were brokering this deal, and you settled on 4. It should be hard to get in. And I'm not one of these guys where our conference champion should automatically go. No, they shouldn't, because not all conferences are created equal. And that gets back to one-loss record and true power ratings to figure out. Look, the ACC this year has one team ranked right now in the preseason top 20. So, I mean, the ACC is a weaker conference than probably every other Power 5 conference out there. Now, look, you got the best team in the country, or 1B, next to Alabama, but from top to bottom, the conference certainly is not up there. So I am not one of these guys in favor of expanding the playoff and making sure your conference champion gets in so your feelings aren't hurt. And hey, we need to throw the group of 5 best team a bone because they might be undefeated, and undefeated is hard. Yes, it is hard, but there are a lot of teams in the Power 5 conferences that would go undefeated against some of those schedules. So there you're looking at, you're not even guaranteeing yourself the best teams in the country in the playoffs if you're putting in conference champions and then throwing in a group of 5 and then 2 wild cards. The other thing I will say is that the conferences, unless they are shown on a sheet of paper written in blood that they are going to make more money than what they're getting right now from the conference championship games, there's no way they're going to agree to do it. The conference championship games right now are money makers from a television standpoint for them. The only one that really, I don't want to say matters, or the only one that really feels like a big deal is the SEC. They were the first, and they kind of, the way that conference is structured, that's the one that really has mattered, because more years than not, you've had a really good game. And the ACC's been a terrible game lately. The Pac-12's been just empty seats galore in that championship. The Big Ten's had some good games, but I don't think it's been a sellout every year. And then if you're going to have a conference championship game, the way the Big 12 does it, I love. You scrap the divisions, 2 best teams, you're in. And I know that might not have made Northwestern fans happy last year, but what happens? What happens if you have an Ohio State Michigan or Ohio State Penn State rematch last year from that? Because I think we all kind of agree that those are the best, probably 3 teams in the conference last year, and just get rid of the divisions, because you don't want to get stuck with hey, our conference champions going to the playoff, and here's Northwestern at 9-4, winning the Big Ten in the ring, or hey, here's UCLA the year that they played Oregon. Yeah, we pull an upset. Yeah, we're 7-6 and we're going to the playoffs. So I mean, there's so many negatives to put in your conference champion in that. I don't like it.
Chris, you're making way too much sense here. I mean, I'm not sure the NCAA is going to like it, but
I will never work for the selection committee. I will never work for the NCAA. Right?
I got to tell you. So I'm close to you, and I get that you say that the committee's wrong, but the 4 teams are correct. Is kind of what you're saying in a nutshell. And I care. College football is my favorite sport, and I'm sure it is yours too, besides the ponies. And you care deeply about the future, and I do too. And I'm worried about conference bias and things like that. And Vegas power ratings should be able to get over that, but they don't use that. They use the committee. I think I'm not sure if 8 teams is not correct. And I guess if I'm going to pitch it to you, this is what I would say. What do kids care about when 4 or 5 star recruits, what do they care about the most, right? Well, they care about getting into the NFL. That's number one.
Correct. Number one.
Number
one by all.
Number one by all means, absolutely. And you're going to have a great chance at Alabama, Clemson, Georgia. Number two, they care about winning a national championship or at least a conference championship, right? Would you agree with that?
I think I would say national. I'd say national championship. I think the allure of the playoff and that Super Bowl type atmosphere of being viewed allows them the avenue to reach the pros as well, because I think the eyeball factor.
Okay.
But I would say agree. So far, so good.
Okay, so number three, I'm going to say staying closer to home to be able to play in front of your friends and your parents is probably number three.
That matters a lot. In a lot of cases, that matters a lot because it's expensive to watch your son play. Or daughter, and if we're talking women's basketball as well, but we're just talking football here. It's expensive to take your family to watch your son play and get on a plane, whereas if you just got to get in the car and drive it. And look, we've seen instances where players have used that as an excuse to transfer back to a school closer to their home because they wanted to be closer to be near their family and allow them to could you see them play?
Absolutely, and that's a great point. And so I guess my case using that for an 8-team playoff is if you look at 2017, Alabama's top 4 recruits were from Florida and California. 3 from Florida and 1 from California, I believe. Now, my question is if I'm from Florida and I'm kind of on the fence, I want to get to the NFL, number one. I'm thinking about winning a national championship. If there's 8 teams in the playoff, do I think maybe staying home and playing in front of my parents would be a better chance of Florida? They might actually get to the playoffs there. That's the argument that I would say. Maybe it keeps some of those recruits a little bit closer to home. Now, there is a law of diminishing returns here. Because I think if you start getting into like 24 playoffs, 32 teams or something like that, then everyone's going to flock back to Alabama or Georgia. But I think there's a sweet spot there where it might spread it out. The West Coast, obviously, unfortunately, the Pac-12 hasn't been up to the standards as the SEC, Big Ten, the Clemsons, and a little bit of the Big 12. So I wonder if from a rating standpoint, a money standpoint, and I guess overall where the recruits are going to go, would an 8-team playoff spread that out a little bit?
Yeah, and I think the other thing, which is it not the hugest sample size out there, but more often than not, these semifinals between 1 versus 4 and 2 versus 3 have been terrible games. They have been blowouts. Mm-hmm. And I think obviously that has to do with Alabama and Clemson being head and shoulders above everybody else. And I would think at some point, look, we all said, USC is going to be great forever. Florida State's going to be great forever. Miami's going to be great forever. Everyone's going to be great forever until they're not. Mm-hmm. There will be a time, as crazy it is to sit here right now and say it and think it, there will be a time when Alabama and Clemson are not as dominant as they are right now and won't be in the playoff every year. But we don't know exactly when that's going to be. But by adding another round of these, making it 1 versus 8 and 2 versus 7 and 3 versus 6, are the chances of these games being competitive and really desirable to watch? That's what I'm worried about. Just adding another round of non-competitive games, right? Just at least right now because of how good the upper echelons are.
But in a box right now, would Clemson and Alabama be this good if there was the rule was stated 4 or 5 years ago when the recruits came in? That's what I wonder. Yes, in a box, 8 teams would suck this year. I mean, it is just so much a discrepancy. But my question, I guess, would would 8 teams fix it 4 years down the road? I don't know. It's a good debate. Let's move into, well, first I want to talk a little bit about Clemson and Alabama. If you're thinking that anybody else should be winning the national championship, you're certainly drinking some Kool-Aid there, Chris. And I think
I wouldn't. If you're picking anybody other than Clemson, Alabama, and Georgia, you're just trying to be that look at me guy. I'm going out on a limb and trying to be different. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So my point is, like, don't go in with any expectations. Don't take anybody. If you think that someone's going to make the playoffs, bet that they're going to make the playoffs, or at least get 50-1 where you can hedge them against Clemson, because they're going to be fat favorites there, and it's going to be hard to hedge for 2 games if that happens. And I guess that's what I'm saying, Chris. Alabama and Clemson are much better against the Rams. I think in my power ratings, I have them at least 5 points ahead of Georgia, and I have Georgia a pretty big discrepancy over the next.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, and it's hard to define. Like, I even think, like, people are like, maybe what if Ohio State, I think, was like under 20-1, I think, to win it all, which is like a ridiculous. Why would you make that bet right now? That's a terrible bet. If you're getting less than 20-1 on Ohio State to win the national championship, that's a terrible price with a team with so many questions. That is Justin Fields actually good, and are they going to go to Michigan and win? I wouldn't take that right now at all.
Terrible.
Like all of the other like possible alternatives you can make an argument for, their prices are so like negated and muted, just not good. I mean, the futures market is just terrible right now in terms of like the percentage chance. I'd love to actually see the true odds of like what Ohio State or Michigan or Oklahoma or else, like what their true odds would be to win the national title compared to like what like the best price you could get in Vegas, because I'm quite sure that the futures market is nowhere near the representative of the actual price you should be getting.
I let it go. And I said to myself, this is the business we've chosen.
100%. I think Ohio State should be 20-25-1 with the discrepancy in the power rating personally. So I completely agree with you there. Well, let's get into what everybody's been waiting for, and that's diving into a little bit of these conferences. For the sake of time, we're just going to kind of hit them each really quick, the 10 conferences, seeing if there's any value there. Starting, well, in somewhat alphabetical order, the ACC, obviously Clemson, minus 355 to win it all. Next is Miami at plus 1,200. Virginia plus...
Wait a minute. Whoa, time out. Stop right there. You said Clemson is only minus 355 to win the ACC?
Chris, these are 4 weeks old, so
I was going to say, maybe it could be. Maybe people all of a sudden they're higher on Syracuse or someone to beat them. I don't know, but I don't know I guess you guys think. Yes, sir.
It was. That's the thing.
Okay.
It was. And this is when you, like, even a little after the time on the Preakness, when we quickly discussed it, you told everyone to jump on Clemson. I haven't looked recently. Even a quarterback injury to Trevor Lawrence, I think they'd still be clear favorites to win this, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, and these are a little bit older, but you have Miami next, Virginia. I got to tell you, I got nothing in this conference. And here's the only thing I took a while ago, and it was maybe a month and a half ago. I took the Virginia season win total over 7.5. They had their stud quarterback, Bryce Perkins. He's back. They returned a ton of defense from last year, 72% production. They held teams to 5.2 yards per play, which wasn't too shabby. They have a great schedule this year. They play Old Dominion, Liberty, and William and Mary in their non-conference. They avoid Clemson, Syracuse, NC State, Boston College, and Wake Forest this year. They play the bottom two in Florida State and Louisville. And yeah, Florida State's going to be better. But, I like them getting over 7.5 wins there, but I think that thing's gone. I took it a while and gave it to customers at minus 7 or at plus money over 7.5, but now I think it's at 8, highly juiced. If they get past that first conference win against Pitt, at Pitt, I think there's going to be smooth sailing after that, Chris. What do you think?
Yeah, they're certainly a very popular team, and that would continue the trend of the ACC with last 6 years, 6 different winners in the Coastal, and Virginia's the only one not to do it. So they're their due team this year. The only thing I worry about in like picking Virginia to get to the ACC title game is they haven't beaten Virginia Tech in forever, and ultimately it will happen. But I might be stubborn, especially after last year. Like until it actually happens, I wouldn't trust them. And then they got to go to Miami. And last year they beat Miami despite scoring 16 points when Miami couldn't get out of their own way offensively. Odds are that's not going to happen again. Mm-hmm. I'm not necessarily as high on everybody as everybody at Virginia, but it's 7.5. I certainly wouldn't play under that. Excuse me. I did play a couple of win totals in the ACC that I give it out on Daily Wager and then on VSiN with Gil, and then on the pod as well. I'm sure these, like your Virginia number, these prices are, I'm sure, gone. I had liked Wake Forest over 5.5 back at the when those games first got posted. I think there's a really good chance the Demon Deacons could open 5-0, and I like BC. I like the BC under 6.5, and I think that's down to 6 now as well. And even at 6, I would still play it. I'd more play. I don't think BC is going to get to 7. I think they got some turnover in the offensive line. I don't think it's as big of a concern as it was initially when I made the bet. Defensively, I think is an issue, and can A.J. Dillon hold up and take a pounding with a bunch of newcomers on an offensive line as well? And you look at the back end of that schedule. They got their final 5 games. A really good chance they don't win any of them. So we'll see about the Florida State game. Who knows what direction the Knoll season's going to take? But Wake over 5.5 and BC under 6.5 are the two main ECC plays that I thought of.
Yeah, those are gone in most books for sure. So I do remember listening to you when you said that. A lot of people are on the Georgia Tech under 2, and with the new coach and everything, and that thing kind of disappeared pretty quickly as well, my man. But don't think you're going to hedge against Virginia if you think they're going to have a shot at winning the ACC. They're going to be laying. Clemson will be laying probably minus 2,000 against this team. So where's your hedging room? Even at 20-1 there's none. So just want to make sure our listeners know that. Even though I like Virginia over their season win total, getting Vatech at home, but I just don't think it's going to happen. So we'll see what happens there. Let's move into the American Athletic Conference, Chris. Do you have anything? I'll let you start with this one. Do you have any thoughts with this?
Yeah, I do. There's definitely a win total here that I like. It's East Carolina over 4.5. I like the schedule, the way it breaks out early. There's a really good chance we're looking at a team that's got 3 or 4 wins by early October. I like Holton Ellers, the softball quarterback now, who played hurt last year late. The thing just kind of got out of control defensively. They were so bad last year, late in the year. They kind of let a game get away against South Florida early in the year that they could have won. Maybe change the direction of their season. But with Mike Houston coming in as head coach now, I think they'll have a completely different mentality. And like I said, I think early in the year, they've got 3 very winnable games. They won in the first 5 games of the year. And I think if you look later in the year, they have a couple of games at home, whether it's South Florida or Cincinnati. They got UConn late in the year. So I think there are a bunch of winnable games in the schedule there for ECU. So I like ECU over the 4.5 wins. And I know Stanford Steve was trying to talk up Tulane a little bit as potentially a sleeper to maybe win the American. You look at that part of the league. Tulsa's down. Navy, who knows what you're going to get? You don't know what you're going to get out of Houston year one with Dana there now. Memphis has had their chance the last couple of years, couldn't break through. SMU looks like they'll put up a bunch of points again. Hopefully they'll be better defensively, but it looks like Tulane might be a team that could be potentially worth a shot at a nice price to win the American, and then they'll certainly be an underdog if they were to get to the conference title game, presumably against UCF. But the one thing I really did like there was East Carolina over 4.5.
Yeah, Tulane. I was eyeing them up too a lot. Did a lot of research on them. I wasn't quite ready to fire on them because I have another play, but I definitely like what you're saying there. I think Steve might be right as a good sleeper. They were at 50-1 not too long ago here, so that's definitely a great play. If you're feeling good about Tulane, maybe you can find some high odds on them. I personally want to fade Central Florida this year, and there's a couple reasons. And number one, I guess Mackenzie Milton. I think he was worth a lot more to that team than people think. And I'm not a big believer in Wimbush, I believe he's going to be starting this year. Is he not starting the beginning of the season for?
Yeah, it'll be Wimbush. Yeah, just because with Mackenzie Milton being out and Daryl Mack getting hurt.
Yeah, Matt got
in
hurt
the offseason as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's a perfect opportunity if you're going to do that. It's 2 years out of Scott Frost now. I like Cincinnati at 7-1, and the Bearcats held opponents to 4.7 yards per play last year. Their offense was at 6.2. That's a 1.5 yard per play difference. That's pretty explosive right there when I look at the numbers, and they returned 71% of their production in both offense and defense. Luke Fickell, he gets to keep his quarterback, Desmond Ridder. And I love his running back, Michael Warren. I watched him a lot last year. He was just bowling people over. I think he's a stud, and I think he's going to be playing on Sundays. But most importantly, this team, they get Central Florida at home, and Cincinnati gets Temple at home. Okay? And I think that makes this within reach. So I did take the 7-1 value on that. And people are hitting Memphis on the other side. I think if Cincinnati gets past those other twos, they could be a favorite in this game. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Cincinnati was a team early in the year last year. I thought they were a little bit of a smoke and mirrors, winning some games that they maybe shouldn't have, and a very weak schedule. But I'm certainly a little bit. Look, they face a difficult non-conference schedule this year. They get Ohio State and they get UCLA early in the year, so they just got to avoid letting maybe a loss at the shoe affect them. But Luke is really recruited very well there, and I do think Cincinnati would be a team worth looking at, especially in the North, of not winning the AAC as well. I mean, the schedule isn't as easy for them this year in the conference-wise, and Memphis obviously would be able to score some points if they were to play them. But the fact that they get UCF at home, I think that in itself is worth a shot.
Absolutely. They have a tough non-conference, UCLA at Ohio State, but sometimes that prepares a team a little bit more, for the easier conference. They play the two, tougher teams, especially Ohio State, and then they get into the conference. It's almost like playing pool on a 9-foot table and jump into a 7-foot table. All of a sudden you get a little bit better. So I kind of like that about that. As long as they stay healthy, obviously they might get a little bit bruised up about that game. In those games. All right. Big 12 is next, Chris. This has always been a tough conference for me to figure out personally. A lot of people fading Texas. All the sharp people I follow and talk to, if you listen to a lot of the other VSIN, the trends out there, everyone's fading Texas. Do you have anything to say about the Big 12 as far as a season win total or future standpoint?
Yeah, it does seem kind of like trendy now, almost like too cool for school to be the guy fading Texas. But I mean, look, 9.5 was a good number. Like, are they going to win 10? I have won 10 in the regular season since 2009, and you have LSU at home in a toss-up game. You've got the OU game, and you've got to go to Ames. You've got to go to Waco. So, like 9-3 is not like an unreasonable expectation for Texas. So, I was on the under 9.5 train back in whenever those numbers were posted, and obviously those numbers are long gone. I wouldn't go under 9 because 9 feels kind of pushy.
Yeah.
But the only thing about the Big 12 that I think we're at is I kind of feel like we're headed towards Oklahoma or Texas versus Baylor or Iowa State in the Big 12 title game. And I think Baylor probably a bit longer for price on Iowa State. So taking a flyer on the Bears to win the Big 12 championship game might not be the worst throw of money around there ever. You look at Brewer coming back and Matt Rule in his third year. Offensively, they're going to be good. Defensively, they will be better. And I just like the way Matt Rule has kind of rebuilt this program and in his image. And look, you get everybody for the most part at home. You get OU at home. You get Texas at home. You get Iowa State at home. All these teams that you could be in tiebreakers with for that potential second spot in the Big 12 title game, you potentially could own those tiebreaks. So if you're holding Baylor at I don't even know. I think that I saw them at 20-1 at one point. I don't know if they still are 20-1. Golden 20-1 on Baylor to win the Big 12, and they're in the game. That might allow you to do some things.
Chris, I jumped on Baylor as well, and now everyone's thinking I'm just going to copycat you right here. But I gotta tell you, I can't wait for this LSU Texas game. I'm excited for this game, and it's not because. Well, it is actually a game that's going to tell you a lot about both sides. If the Texas is kind of for real, it's not because it's an end of the year game, right? But I'm going to sit on my couch and eat some popcorn, put my phone down, drink some soda, and just watch this game. Give the kids their iPads. This is the kind of game that I was really excited for. So I cannot wait to watch that. Only because all you're hearing about Texas and LSU, I think it's a key game for me that second week there. But Oklahoma replaces a ton of production on offense. I'm not super high on Jalen Hurts. Sometimes I think you or I could quarterback against at Alabama and win in 6 or 7 games. Jalen, I'm sure, you saw how well he performed when Tua went out too. And I could be wrong here, but there's a reason he's not starting there. Oklahoma returns a lot of people on defense. They return 8 starters there. But like you said, they have some tougher away games. If I was going to be devil's advocate for Texas with their brutal schedule, having to play LSU at TCU, at Baylor, at Iowa State, somewhat of a neutral game against the Sooners, I would say at least they got a decent recruiting class back in 2016. And that's when these players are juniors, seniors. They did rank 7th. So for Tom Herman there, I guess that's one thing that could be looking up. Could they be a reload team this year? I don't know. But definitely only returned 48% production with that kind of schedule scares you a little bit, doesn't it?
It does. I'm glad you brought up the Jalen Hurts Oklahoma thing, because everyone just kind of like throwing his name out there as like a Heisman candidate. Will he be the 3rd straight Lincoln Riley? I'm not there at all with that. At Alabama, Jalen was afforded a luxury in an Alabama defense that was fantastic. And the offense wasn't under pressure to go out there on the field and score every drive. It was more of a run-based offense in Alabama. He threw when he had to, and that was the reason why he was benched ultimately, because he wasn't as good of a thrower as Tua. And now he's got to go to an offense where it's throw first, and he's more of a run first, and he has a defense which is terrible. Mm-hmm. And the offense is going to be under pressure to score a heck of a lot more than it was at Alabama. So I'm curious as well to see ultimately how that goes.
Yeah, Alabama had a lot of wide open guys because everyone had to stack up and stop their run, and that's why they switched. I 100% agree with you there. I'm very curious as well. Definitely won't have a ticket on Hurts for the Heisman. Hopefully he proves me wrong. He's definitely gonna have a chip on his shoulder. But I love Baylor, and I got them at 26-1 early to win. They return 65% production on offense, 85% on defense. There's consistency with Charlie Brewer and coach Matt Rule. That's one of the rules I have, is if there's consistency with the coach and the quarterback, and I like how they finished their season beating Texas Tech and Vandy last year. That's kind of a buy-on signal for me, as well as, of course, returning production. I loved their schedule, that getting Iowa State, like you said, Oklahoma and Texas all at home. And to make the playoffs is 50-1. If you think that not only win the Big 12 at your 20-1, if that gets a little bit low, there's possible chance that the Big 12 champion would make the playoffs. So sprinkling a little bit of money on the 50-1 might not be too bad of an idea. I think this team's a sleeper, man. Moving on to the Big 10, Chris. This is my favorite conference, as you know, being a big Badger alumni and fan. Shocker. Huge shocker there. But, and I'm just going to say this. Ohio State and Michigan are definitely the number 1 and number 2 in this whole conference. But what I am going to say is that the other side, the West, I think as a whole might be better than the East. As a whole. Not saying, of course, Ohio State, Michigan, they deserve to be number 1. So I got to tell you, I can't wait till that, of course, Ohio State-Michigan game, just like every year. Michigan's got to get their head out of their ass and get to this game and start it well. Because if they give Ohio State momentum, it's just going to be one of those things again where Harbaugh just gets completely shit on for the rest of the season. Now, there's a lot of people on Michigan State, but and that seems to be another sharp trend to be on Michigan State, but I can't do that. I can't buy into Brian Lewerke there. They had a terrible offense last year. I mean, during a snowstorm in Nebraska, where you think this is Michigan State's football, they can only score 6 points against Nebraska, ranked 96th in defense. I was like, how am I supposed to be on this team? So I'm not loving them. I'm not going to go under their total, but I'm not going over it. But like a lot of other people, on Nebraska, it's Scott Frost's second year, but how bad that defense was, and they did take some people by surprise last year. I'm not so sure if they're the team. I still think they might be a year away, and I think there's no value on their number at all. Scott Frost coached in the AAC, but he's coaching against 3-star guys, 4-star guys that rotate their defensive linemen to his fast play. They have some film on this guy now. I don't think Nebraska's going to have it nearly as easy as people think. Michigan State's an unders team. I think I might be against you in this one. Penn State, I like them under 8.5 wins. I think this year without Trace McSorley, Miles Sanders, and their receiver Juwan Johnson, I think this is the year they feel the pain from losing Joe Moorhead to Mississippi State. Their defense is going to be great, and their first 6 games is very nice. So maybe they do get better, but they got at Ohio State, at Michigan State, and home against Michigan, and Michigan might be the toughest one if that's the case. That could be 3 losses. They better run the table. So I am definitely taking under 8.5 wins. Purdue's way down, and I love Brom, their coach there. I love him, and I think they have a great receiver there. And what's his name again? Rondale Moore, is it? And
Rondale Moore.
Yeah, and he might have a great year, but I just can't be on Purdue with how much they lost in their production. And I got to tell you, I jumped on Minnesota here, and I've heard that you did before too, Chris. So I think the Gophers, and it pains me as a Badger fan to say this, man, but I took them at 5-1 to win the Big Ten, and I made this bet at 70-1 to win the Big Ten, the full Big Ten, 5-1 to win the Big Ten West, and I made this bet on June 9th. So you can see that 71 is long gone. I think it's more like 25-1 now for Minnesota to win it. But Minnesota returned 78% of production from last year, ranking 10th of all college football. They have the easiest schedule. They avoid Ohio State, Michigan State, Michigan. They get Penn State at home, which I'm saying is a down Penn State team. They get Nebraska and Wisconsin at home. That's huge. They not only avoid those teams, but they get the other 2 contenders, Nebraska and Wisconsin, at home. They get back Antoine Winfield Jr., great secondary player right there. I love how they finished the season, man. I love how they took the axe from Wisconsin. Well, as a fan, I hated it, but I love what they did there. They went to a motivated Georgia Tech team. Now, we don't take bowls as the end-all be-all, especially in some of those situations like, Michigan, Florida, and, in some of those other ones. But Georgia Tech should have been motivated losing Paul Johnson in that bowl game. And they couldn't even barely put 10 points up against Minnesota. Something clicked in Minnesota after they got their butts beat. I thought there was a ton of value on Minnesota there. And so I rarely do this, but I think this situation warrants. I don't think, as long as you're not playing on Nebraska, I think you could play 2 teams to win the West, and you could pick your 2. A lot of people like Iowa. If you're confident in Northwestern, I'm not, but some people are. But I like Minnesota at 5-1 to win the West, and I like Wisconsin at 3.75-1. What are your thoughts on this division?
Where do I start after all that? I should have been taking notes. I think all back to the first thing you said. You could put the Big Ten West in a hat, or just like throw a dart or say a name. And if you say anybody other than Illinois, I'll buy your argument for saying they could win the West. From that standpoint, I do agree with you that the Big Ten West is deep in that regard. That deep by deep, I guess, meaning balanced, or any 6 teams could win it. I don't confuse that with good. I think those are two different things. and I think the strength of the Big Ten East, I think, is still the East is much stronger than the West. I think it differs because of our opinions on Penn State. I think Penn State is good. I think Penn State has got a bunch of sophomores on the skill positions on offense that they should open 5-0, and when they go to Iowa for that sixth game, maybe that's a coming out party. We'll know then. We'll see if it comes together for them. But I like Penn State defensively, and Penn State was a team where I think they were somewhere around 20-1 or so to win the Big Ten, and that I thought was worth a play as well. I found a rogue 9.5 for Ohio State in terms of a win total a couple months ago. I don't think it's still out there, but I would think 10-2 is probably a worst case scenario for Ohio State. So I found the 9.5 and laid some extra juice. I'm looking at the other side of the division right now to see if I had any other. Well, yeah, I like Purdue under 7.5 wins.
I took that as well.
Yeah, I just think the non-conference, none of those three games are gimmies, and I'm very surprised to see that number week one out in Reno was up to 10. I wouldn't be too antsy to lay double digits with Purdue on the road in Reno week one against a Nevada team that can score some points even with a new quarterback. And I'm with you on Minnesota. They were the team that I had mentioned on Daily Wager a few weeks back about winning the Big Ten West. I just for many of the reasons that you had laid out there in terms of avoiding the tougher crossover opponents, the schedule, and just everything that the Gophers bring back, and PJ Fleck going there, it seems to be a perfect situation for him. And in year three, I think Minnesota, even with losing part of their quarterback equation, will hurt. But I still think the Gophers are a team that I saw 4-1 at last check was when we did the segment, so that was the value that I thought. But again, you could say anybody but Illinois, and I'd be like, all right, I'll buy that.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're right about their defense at Penn State. Micah Parsons, an absolute beast there. Gross Matos over there. You know, they're gonna be a good unders team, I think, personally, especially for the first 5 or 6 games. Penn State. The problem with just defensive football, though, is if their offense is bad enough to turn the ball over on their side of the field, then look out. Your defense can only do so much. If they're 5-0, I'm going to be worried about that one though too, going into that Iowa game. So we'll see what happens. Absolutely great play on Ohio State. Day's a great coach. He's going to be coming in and setting a new culture there. They do have,
and I think people forget. I think people forget that Ohio State played their best football last year, early in the year, when Ryan Day was the interim head coach. Now, obviously, yes, when they were a home underdog against Michigan, and Urban could push the emotional buttons and the no respect and get them fired up. Yeah, obviously the Michigan game was different, but until that point, I mean, it is a team that was in games with Nebraska and Minnesota for a half, and Michigan State and Maryland. Honestly, easily could have lost every single one of those games. And I wonder if the Ryan Day thing won't be. I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this. Urban was such a great head coach in motivating his team and getting them emotionally ready to play when they were an underdog, no belief, doubt, chip on shoulder, adversity, kind of rise up. But for whatever reason, his message wasn't getting through against Iowa or Purdue or Michigan State or Virginia Tech. Like the games that they're these massive double-digit favorites and they should win. For whatever reason, the players weren't buying into Urban saying, hey, we could lose this week, or whatever the message might have been. So I think the Ryan Day hiring might be beneficial to Ohio State. Just a different message on weeks like that. You might see a little bit less of the the up and down Ohio State. You might see more of a level, even keel Ohio State as opposed to the ones that are going to get knocked off as a 17-point favorite of Iowa.
Yeah. Good concerns there for Day. We'll see what happens with that. Urban Meyer seems just like such a stress ball out there every time I watch him. And maybe it was time for him to move on for some good mental healing there. And Day, like you said, did a great job. It's a small sample size, but we'll see. The last thing I'm going to say about Wisconsin here is, a lot of people are down on them this year, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes in Wisconsin last year. They lost their receiver to legal troubles, Quintez Cephas, before the season started. A couple weeks ago, the jury in 30 minutes found him not guilty, and as of this morning, he was reinstated back to the school. So I wonder if he's going to be back playing by conference time. That's real interesting. They lost Garrett Rand, their best defensive end, early as well in spring last year, out for the season with a torn Achilles. And they were hurt so bad that there was freshman offensive linemen playing on the D line. And they only got 19 sacks last year, and somehow their secondary was still pretty good. The big question is the linebackers there, but their offensive line was way overrated being on Sports Illustrated's cover. That was ridiculous, comparing them to Clemson. Are you kidding me? Making them number one. I don't know what the hell is that. I didn't even think that their offensive line was the best that they've ever had. I thought there was plenty of better offensive lines there. Jack Cohn, is he going to start? Probably, but he's going to be on that short leash with that guy named Graham Mertz coming up and watching over his back, similar to a Trevor Lawrence. No comparison there, just know that. But he enrolled early. He has that spring semester on him as well. He's a very motivated kid and did great in the spring game. I think Wisconsin, with Jordan Taylor there, could be a very, very sneaky team to look very good again this year. So keep your eyes out for that. Let's move into Conference USA, Chris, and this is a big conference. I'll get started with this one, and Vegas seems to like Florida Atlantic a lot here, and maybe it's because their schedule and their coach Kiffin over there, and they get Middle Tennessee, Marshall, and Southern Miss, and FIU all at home, but they get to avoid playing North Texas, UAB, LA Tech, but I'm not a big believer in Chris Robinson or DeAndre Francois at quarterback. I'm not, and I think Robinson is still suspended.
What would possibly cause you not to be a believer in DeAndre Francois?
The demise.
What kind of evidence is there over the last couple of years to support that?
The demise of FSU. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny. We used to be so high on them, but that was absolutely wrong. So definitely not in Florida Atlantic. Lost a lot of production. They only returned 57%. Of production, ranking 96th, I believe. UAB lost a ton. They're dead last in returning production this year, and I think someone might have a season win total for us on that one. Marshall returns 57% production as well. They're low. They rank 94th. Middle Tennessee State lost their quarterback, Brent Stockstale, and he was really good, and they returned 48% production. A lot of these teams are down. So because of this, I like Florida International. I like them at plus 575 here, and you might even be able to find better. FIU was kind of my team that I liked for overs last year, and I won on that bowl against Toledo in the Bahamas there. They ranked 6th in returning production. 80% on offense, right? And they produce 6.4 yards per play. Consistency at quarterback with James Morgan and Butch Davis going into his third year. I love betting on coaches going to their third year. Great job winning 8 games last year, almost taking out Marshall at the end. I don't love their schedule, though. That's my problem. At the end, they play FAU, Miami, and then at Marshall. But at the number, I liked it. What are your thoughts on this conference?
You alluded to it. UAB was the win total that I had played here, and I actually got it at 8.5. Circa had put up 8.5 out in Las Vegas, and it was interesting because they the total was 7 in a lot of places, and when I saw that they posted 8.5, I was like, oh boy, that's I need to send somebody over there right away to take care of that for me. But you're looking at a team that, what they've done the last couple of years. 2 years ago, they were very underrated. They weren't going to be as bad as that. Oh, they didn't have a team. They're going to be terrible. How are they going to win 3 games? And well, they won whatever they did. They won, and the win total went over the first or second week of October. This year, however, you lose 35 or 40 letter winners from a team. You've got a bunch of newcomers here. Even with the win total still at 8, I think if you assume that they'll lose to Tennessee, assume that they lose to Louisiana Tech, assume that they lose to Southern Miss, and there was one other game in there that I was banking on them being a significant underdog as well. And the game in North Texas. So in the 4 games that they should be underdogs in that they most likely will lose, that puts it at 8-4 as kind of the best case scenario, and that means they'd have to win every other game on there just to push at 8. So you can still find 8 on UAB. I would advise going under 8 on UAB. I'm with you on FIU. I'd love to, knowing Butch and being friendly with Butch. I hope they do well, and I know they think very highly of Morgan, the quarterback. I like FIU more than I do FAU. Rice will probably be one of the worst teams in the country. If you can find under 3 or 3.5, that might be worth looking at as well. That might have dropped to 2.5 or so. If you can find a 3 or 3.5 on Rice, under there might be worth a shot as well.
Yeah, 100%. Rice is they're definitely. I think I have them 129th, and I think maybe Massachusetts might be worse. I got to relook at my power rings, but yeah, they're definitely down there. I'm glad you like my thoughts on FIU there, Butch. I'm rooting for him this year for sure. UAB, just too much return. They lost too much when it comes to these smaller conferences. They rely on their seniors more than the bigger conferences, right? That's when they're grown men and. You don't get that stud freshman coming in. That was a 4 or 5 star recruit. So 100% agree with you on that. Let's move into the MAC conference, Chris. You and I had a play on that last year that faltered at the end.
Don't remind me.
Yeah, I know, but you know what? We hedged it properly. It was my biggest one, so at least the hedge worked out well. But is there anything we can find in the MAC this year, or is the conference kind of bleak?
I think Western Michigan might have been a conference title odds. Those odds might have been pretty good. Again, here there were a couple of win totals in here that I did like. No hard feelings, Buffalo, but I just think you're an under team this year. I played Buffalo under 7. I think it's down to 6.5 now. The stars were aligned. Last year was supposed to be the with Tyree Jackson and KJ Osborne and Anthony Johnson, that offense, that was supposed to be their year. They got to the top of the game and just couldn't finish it off. However, this year you're looking at a 2 deep or a starting 22 rather, littered with a lot of sophomores. Lance Leipold has done a great job building that program up. It just feels like this is a step back year to have another good chance at making a run next year to win the MAC. So I'm under 7 on Buffalo, and I'm under 7 on Northern Illinois. You look at the non-conference schedule, they'll probably lose all 3 of those games. I know they won in Lincoln a couple of years ago, but this is going to be a better Nebraska team and a better coached Nebraska team. You look at how NIU won some of their games last year with bad offensive play, really relying on the defense bailing them out. You lose your best defensive players. Tom Hammond, the head coach, is back in the college game for the first time in a while, NIU alum. So I just, if they win 8, I'd be shocked. If you keep your 1-3 in the non-conference, or you lose your 3 non-conference games, you've got to go 8 and 9 and 8 and 1 the rest of the way to beat me. So I'll take my chances there.
Well, that's a great play, Chris, and I looked at that play.
I will say it's heavy juice, by the way.
Yeah,
under 7, but it was one of those where I always try and be a little bit conservative with my my totals plays, and I would rather pay the extra juice to get a number that I don't think I'm going to lose, and if I wind up pushing, that's fine. So you might be able to find under 6.5 out there at maybe plus money or better odds than under 7. But I like to try and take losing out of the equation as much as I can control.
Hey, man, that separates the pros and the Joes there. You take the juice there if you have to, eat the juice because they're telling you that that's the right side. And a lot of times it's worth it because there's just, at minus 200, that's more of a 66% chance area. So absolutely. I 100% agree with you. I wish I jumped on that one earlier because I probably could have got a better number. I just looked at it pretty recently and realized I missed that one. I still might take Northern Illinois right there. The MAC's up in the air, in my opinion. I see Toledo as a favorite in some places. Ohio, those are kind of the teams that are people looking at.
Yeah, I would think. I think Ohio probably would be the top favorite, just because I think the East is going to be a much weaker division than the West is this year. I think in the East, outside of some people think Miami, Ohio could make a step forward this year. I think Buffalo's down, but they still might be the third best team in that division because you got Akron and Bowling Green, who are going to be amongst the worst teams in the country this year.
Yeah,
and it's interesting. I think Kent State. I was looking at them as a team that I would love to play over on a win total on them, but I just can't because you're talking about a team that's got like zero shot in some of their non-conference games, and you're looking at a team that's basically going to have to win 3 or 4 conference games this year to go 4 conference games this year to go over the win total of 4. I just can't do it with that, even though I do think the Golden Flashes are on the ascent.
Well, you know what? What you said about Kent State is kind of where I was going, so I'm hoping that your first inclination there might have been right. This when the conference is this,
and I think they're going to ASU. They're going to ASU as well early in the year. Kent State. They're going to Arizona State.
Yes.
As well.
Yes. Yeah, they have to play ASU. Where's my numbers here in Kent State? They got at ASU, then they got Kennesaw State, then at Auburn. And so, you can start.
And Kennesaw State is not a pushover as a lower division team. They are an up and comer that made the playoffs last year, and they're not a bad team at all. So that's going to be Kent State's probably like single digit favorite in that game.
I think Ohio wins it, but at plus 300, I don't want to take it. They returned their stud quarterback, Nathan Rourke. He had 2,500 yards and 23-8 interception ratio, TD interception, but they lost a lot of defense. Toledo was a powerhouse on offense, but they only returned 54% of total production. When I first looked at it, I liked Western Michigan. They ranked number 1 in returning production, bringing back most of their team, ranked number 1 on everybody, but I hate their schedule. They have to go to Northern Illinois, and they play good at home, to Toledo and to Ohio. That was kind of tough for me to look at. Just what you said about NIU is enough. But I think that there's a way I'm going to take a shot here, and it's not going to be a big shot by any means. But Kent State's total was 4 games when I took it, and I still think it's plus money at the over. It was at plus 160 when I took it. So their odds to win the MAC was 55-1. So what I did is I just put a unit on the over 4 wins, and put a half unit on the 55-1. So I'm still actually about even or plus money if they get over their 4 games, make up for my bet. If they obviously most likely won't win the MAC. Now, I like the fact that Kent State is 8th in returning production. Sean Lewis is now in his 2nd year. He's got a good dual threat quarterback, Woody Barrett, and he came from Auburn. Ironically, they play Auburn, right? A lot of potential last year. He did complete 59% of his passes. Kent State, they have only 5 home games, but they're winnable to me. Kennesaw State, yeah, that tough FCS team, they got to beat them. But they got Bowling Green at home with a new coach and QB. They got Miami of Ohio with a new quarterback, and they only return 57% of production. They have Buffalo, who pretty much lost everybody at home. And I do like Leopold, but it's one of those years, like you said. And they have Ball State at home, who has a new quarterback and was pretty bad last year on defense. So they have 2 winnable road games from what I saw, and that's at Akron and at Eastern Michigan. I think those are their winnable road games. But I figured if I just win the over 4, I'm winning the money. You know, you can even put a third of a unit on the 50-1 if you want. But that's kind of my longest shot here. Am I on my mind here?
Are you out of your mind? I will never talk anybody off of a 50-1 shot. It's good, but yeah, I'm glad to see you're seeing similar things with them that I am. So that'll certainly make me look twice about it as well.
Fantastic. Well, for the sake of time, we got to get moving here. Let's move into the Mountain West Conference, and I'll start here. And I don't have a ton here, but both Boise State and Fresno State are really down. I think from production wise, both teams. They lost their skill positions and their quarterbacks. Terrible odds on these to win it. Utah State returns only their quarterback Jordan Love and left tackle on offense, right? And they have that new coach Gary Anderson, and from his Wisconsin days and those Oregon State days that we saw Gary, I think I saw a little bit too much Gary, after losing Matt Wells. I don't like that, so I can't jump on Utah State. San Diego State and Hawaii are the most intriguing to me because they have the easier division, returning the most production. Fresno State, like I said, is very down, only returning 36% production, ranking 129th out of 130 teams. Now, Hawaii started out great last year, but we quickly learned midseason that Navy and Colorado State weren't that good. The Rainbow Warriors faltered to a 5-8-1 against the spread. So everyone jumped on them in the beginning. They're like, wow, and then overvalued. San Diego State, on the other hand, was a net positive 0.4 yards per play in a rebuild year last year. They checked the boxes of good returning production, 67%, consistency, coach Rocky Long and quarterback Ryan Agnew. Great schedule, avoiding Boise State and Air Force. Well, they get Utah State, Wyoming, Nevada, and Fresno State all at home. In 2018, they didn't return that much production. So like I said, these kids are pretty new, they were new last year. They're actually pretty acclaimed now this year to the division. I don't love how they finished their season, but they kind of had that excuse. Losing to Fresno State, it took them out of the Mountain West Championship thoughts. So I took them at I was actually looking at plus 475 to win the Mountain West, but I like them winning just the West Division at plus 160 because I did the break-even analysis on the extra game to hedge the extra game. They'd have to be, the break-even point against a Boise State is minus 121. If you look at ESPN's FPI and a couple other power ratings, it looks like Boise State's going to be more of a minus 200. So it's better for me just to play the plus 160 here and actually like their season win total of over. What are your thoughts on this division?
In terms of the Mountain West, the one thing that I really liked in the Mountain West was Colorado State under 4 wins. In looking at their schedule, outside of Western Illinois, I just don't know where the wins are. I know a lot of things went. They'll be favored against New Mexico, maybe, but they barely beat the Lobos last year in Fort Collins. They got UNLV at home, and I think the Rebels will be better this year. They certainly showed some life at the latter part of last year, pulling a couple of upsets and playing a lot better. But I just don't know how CSU gets to 5 with a lot of turnover on the offensive side of the ball and just and some of the games that they. You look at the schedule and unfortunately rotates San Diego State, or rather San Jose State off the schedule, one of the worst teams in the country, and you wind up picking up Boise State. So I just don't. Are you going to go to Arkansas and win? Probably not. CU, Mel Tucker in his first game, I would think their defense will probably keep them in check. Again, this is one of those bets where if CSU gets to 5 and beats me, just so be. I'll just tip my cap and congratulate them. But I think this is a 3-9 type team, and if I push it 4-8, okay, that's fine. But I certainly can't see losing this bet. Man,
yeah, they're down. And I remember when Colorado State was actually the team in this Mountain West Conference here, and boy, have they faltered over the years. Yeah, we'll see about that Mel Tucker game. I'm not super high on Mel Tucker from his days at the Chicago Bears defensive coordinator, but he certainly...
College is a different game.
Yeah, absolutely. But he had himself a few recruits in Georgia as well. But and it is, and I didn't bet under on Colorado, but I'm not gonna jump at them first. It's kind of like one of those wait and see moments for me. But any thoughts on my San Diego State play, or should we move?
No, that's not a bad play at all. Because I think obviously Fresno State will be a little bit down this year. Hawaii, I think they were a little bit of a fool's goal team last year. San Jose State's one of the worst teams in the country. I do think UNLV will be better, and they might be a team I could potentially look at maybe going over 4 or 4.5. I think their number was. And Nevada, I know people have mixed opinions on them. I actually kind of like Nevada a little bit this year, but I'm certainly not opposed to your San Jose State play this year at all, especially with how last year kind of went and really they weren't a typical Rocky Long type team, and they're going to evolve this year, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them bounce back and find themselves a conference title game.
Yeah, I definitely think they have a shot with some return of production. They did win that ASU game. They definitely. I think the value there, just that I don't see anybody else out of that division in the West winning it. So that's kind of what I looked at. The Pac-12, I got nothing, man. I'm gonna let you start. I just let you know I have no plays in the Pac-12. Some people are on Utah. What are your thoughts here?
I'm not on Utah, especially. I actually like if I can find Utah under 9.5 out there still or even under 9 at plus money, I'd look into that. And look, this is no slight on Utah. That Kyle Whittingham's teams are always going to be well coached, have a solid defense, good special teams. But I think people are falling on Utah only because like the South is in so much flux in terms of new coaches in their second year. They're not going to go to Seattle and win. And even if they do, they're going to have to probably beat UW again in the conference championship game, or maybe have to beat them depending on what happens with Oregon. But I am not on the Oregon or the Utah overtrain. That's for sure. I actually played 2 win totals in the Pac-12. I played Arizona State over 6.5 at plus money. I think the way their schedule breaks out, the majority of their difficult games are at home, with the exception of the trip to Rice-Eccles. I like the true freshman quarterback. From what I hear, the team just kind of gravitated towards him from the start, and I think that'll be a good thing. And Matty Wilkins, as experienced as he still made some decisions last year and had some games that kind of made you shake your head. So I think that the potential for better quarterback play is there. Mm-hmm. Benjamin's one of the better running backs in the country that nobody knows about. Merlin Robertson's a sophomore linebacker this year who missed the bowl game last year. He's really highly thought of. And just knowing Herm is going to get those kids to play for him. And I think it's very, very easy for them to be able to find 7 wins on that schedule. So I'm over 6.5 at plus money on ASU, and I'm under 6 on Cal. If you look at Cal, the defense obviously is great. The secondary could be potentially one of the best units in the country. Offensively, they have a ton of issues. And if you look at last year, winning 3 games by a field goal or less, including beating Washington and USC in those types of games, can you bank on that again? You look at the road schedule, there's a really good chance they go 0-6 on the road, which right there means they got to go 6-0 at home in order to push it on 6. So I think 5-7 is a really likely scenario for Cal. So I am under 6 on Cal and over 6.5 on ASU. Those are the 2 that I played. And as you could find a 9.5 at Washington, I'd potentially look at going over 9.5 with UW, just because you got 3 gimmies in the non-conference, and I think they can scrape 7-2 out of the rest of the conference schedule.
Yeah, funny how all of our opinions changed on ASU from last year with Hermie and coming back in. So congrats to him.
This is what's great about sports. This is what the greatest thing about sports is. You play to win the game. Hello? You play to win the game. You don't play to just play it. That's the great thing about sports. You play to win. And I don't care if you don't have any wins. You go play to win. When you start telling me it doesn't matter, then retire. Get out. Because it matters.
You know, Washington, oh man, I made a case against every single one of these teams, and you made me think a little bit about ASU, though. I'm going to take another look at them. I'm looking at their schedule here, and you got me a little excited for them. You know, I wanted to be high on Oregon. I really did. But they play at Stanford, at Washington, at USC, at ASU. You know, that doesn't sit well for me. You know, especially coming off an Auburn game. You know,
that's the thing. I think if you're looking at talent, like pure like upside talent ability, Oregon is like the most talented team in the conference, or right there with Washington. It's just like you said, the fact that they have every single one of their difficult games away from home. And I think if you look at Pac-12 games, I think the last 4 years, I think it is, I think there's something like 3-11 or something like that away. It's some ridiculous number where they have been a terrible team away from home.
Yeah, absolutely. Washington seemed like an okay pick with me. Your 9.5 looks okay. They have to play USC and Utah from the South. They lost a lot of players. Washington State lost Gardner Minshew, and they always sneak up on us with Leach over there. Such a great motivator and coach, you know. So that's why I guess I don't have any plays, but I'm going to look at that. I'm definitely going to look at that ASU a little bit closer now that you said that. So that's one that'll be keying in on. Well, let's move into the SEC, Chris. Obviously, Alabama, the big favorite to win there, but I think Georgia's keeping their juice a little bit lower, which is a good thing for Alabama bettors, I suppose. And then you have Florida jumping way up in the plus 1,300, 13 to 1, 15 to 1-ish. LSU 15 to 1-ish. Auburn 30 to 1. The list goes on. There's some hard schedules here, Chris, but you know the SEC best, so I'm going to let you start here.
I'm playing Georgia to win the national championship at 7 to 1. Is the best price that I found them on. They remind me a lot of 2009 Alabama, the team that finally broke through, beat Urban Meyer, beat Tim Tebow, won the SEC, and wound up winning the national title that year. I think the most overblown storyline of the offseason is like the demise of the Georgia wide receiver core. Georgia's going to be just fine at wide receiver. Trust me. They've got the best offensive line in the country. They've got a quarterback in Jake Fromm who's been through all the battles. They got arguably one of the top 3, maybe, would you think 3-5 running backs in the country in DeAndre Swift. Defensively, they're going to mix things up this year and get after the passer. I think they'll be fine defensively. Yeah, they lose coordinators, and that could be an issue. I know people have pointed that out, but I love Georgia, and maybe it's a situation where maybe it's the 2017 model where they lose at Auburn and wind up getting to the SEC championship game and winning that, and that's how they get in. But I like this Georgia team. I think it's 7 to 1. They are worth playing to win the national title. The one win total I did play here was Florida under 9. I think 9-3 is likely the best case scenario for the Gators. I think if you look at the schedule and assume they're going to lose in Baton Rouge and they're going to lose in Jacksonville against Georgia, that puts 10-2 as the upper echelon. Like, are they going to win every other game on that schedule? Which a game away from home against Miami, they should win. But Auburn, South Carolina, who's given them games, Kentucky, who beat them last year, Missouri, who's given them games. Like, it's not Autumn, Tennessee, who should be better this year. Vandy's given them games. Like Florida, you just can't pencil in all these games that look like wins for Florida and just think they're going to run the table and go 10-2 or so. So I worry about the fact that they won every close game last year. Will that happen again? Plus about 12 or 13 in turnovers last year. Will that happen again? Look, I love Dan Mullen. He's one of my favorite coaches, and I think he's going to do great things at Florida. But I think expecting them to win the SEC East this year is a little too much. I see 9-3 as the best case scenario for Florida, more than likely, I think they're going to finish 8-4. But that is the only real strong win total opinion that I have in this league.
Gotcha. Yeah, Florida, they still have that tough SEC schedule. At least they avoid Bama. But, and people are higher on some other teams like Vandy at LSU. It's kind of tough there. So I guess I lean with you there. The SEC is the best conference in college football. Once again this year, it might not even be close. I mean, as a whole, Alabama's got a nice ride. They have an easy non-conference, no real back-to-back games. And that's how smart that they are at scheduling. They get LSU and Tennessee at home. The whole Georgia and against Bama there might give you a little more value at 7-1. With no Alabama, Georgia's probably a 1.5 to 1. If let's just say Alabama was in a ACC or Pac-12, right, or a different division. So just Bama sitting there, and if they can just make the playoffs, even if they lose their championship game to Bama, that could be a good one. Kirby Smart worries me a little bit. I think hopefully he's going to be making some better in-game decisions. As you know, going for it like that at the 50 or whatever it wasn't the smartest thing to do in that situation. Tennessee has been trendy for people to take, I think. I don't have a lot here. Kentucky's interesting. They're a nice surprise last year, but they lost Josh Allen. Benny Snell they lost. They lost some pretty good players there. Missouri's really interesting. Is Kelly Bryant going to have that huge chip on his shoulder and do great from leaving Clemson?
Yeah, they're the scheduled team. They're the scheduled trendy darling team for a lot of people. Missouri.
Yeah, they are absolutely. And LSU should be better, but not by Alabama standards. They took a few hits on defense. The Texas game should tell us something. I have sad news for South Carolina and Texas A&M this year. Real sad news. You get to play Alabama and Clemson. So
lucky them.
Good luck with that.
And Georgia.
Yeah, and Georgia, Florida, at Missouri, South Carolina.
And that's the interesting thing with Texas A&M. You look at the Aggies facing arguably the 4 highest power-rated teams in the country. If you want to throw LSU in there, right? And their win total is like 7.5. And I think people are like flocking to the A&M. Jimbo Fisher, year 2, they'll win 8 games. Assume that they'll lose all 4 of those games. Mm-hmm. That puts 8-4 as the max. Mm-hmm. They haven't swept the Mississippi schools since Johnny left. So it's not even a guarantee that they're going to get a split or win. They're not kind of guaranteed that they're going to do better than a split against Ole Miss and Mississippi State. And I put 7-5 in playing. A&M is going to be like the greatest like arbiter for like the power ratings versus like one-loss record this year. Like A&M could be 8-4 or 7-5, and like based on raw strength and power ratings, could be like a top 10 team this year.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just so unfortunate for them to have that schedule in the toughest conference in all of college football. I wanted to take South Carolina under 5.5 plus money, but there's a reason 5.5 is such a tough number. It's because that bowl eligibility thing at 6, they strive to get to 6. It was. I talked myself out of it, but I think it's something I would lean for South Carolina. I really feel sorry for Muschamp out there. But that's all I have for the SEC, Chris. I love your play there, though, Georgia. That's making a statement, my man.
Yeah, and we'll see what I could look really smart or really, really stupid. But I think that they're a team that they're going to be in the SEC title game, and we'll see what happens.
We'll be watching that all year. That brings up the last conference, the Sun Belt here. And, the funny thing about the Sun Belt, a lot of people thought that, they're the worst conference. They always look at the worst conference. Well, I can possibly argue that they might be one of the best Group of 5 conferences.
No, no, Sun Belt is not the worst conference out there. Oh, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. I mean, Arkansas State is a good team. Louisiana is on the come up. App State, there is an argument to be made that App State is one of the Yeah, you want to say the third? You want to say third best Group of 5 team behind UCF and Boise? Would you buy that argument?
I would say they're better than that. Personally, you should have said at worst third best. Yes,
I guess. I mean, Coastal Carolina's a team coming up. Georgia Southern, a great year last year. Troy, obviously, year in and year out. We'll see with the new coach what they can do. South Alabama is one of the worst teams in the country, and so is Georgia State. But no, this is a team that if you put these teams up against, the MAC or Conference USA, the Sun Belt certainly holds on.
Yeah, and I do have a few plays in there, and
good because I don't this year. Last year I had Georgia Southern over easy winner, UL Monroe over winner, Georgia Southern to win conference to win the Sun Belt last year. I had that as well. But this year I couldn't really find anything. The only thing I came close to, two things I came looking at were Louisiana over, but I just don't know if the schedule is going to allow them to get to 6 or 7, which it might have been 7. It might have been 6.5 was their total, and I just didn't know if I could trust it to get to 7. And then Georgia State under, but I think I saw 2.5 or 3, and it wasn't the number that I was looking for. Those are the only things I came close to pulling the trigger on this year.
Yeah, and I think Appalachian State, and I'm going to just go on a limb and say that they're the best team. Boise State, they lost their quarterback, Brett Rippon, who's been playing there for, 4 years. They lost their all their skill positions, running backs, to the NFL. Madison went to the Vikings. They lost their receivers. How can I put them above Appalachian State? That is one of the top.
And big loss, Andy Avalos going to Oregon as defensive coordinator.
Right. Absolutely. Got to think of that. That's a change too. And then like Central Florida with Wimbush out there, I'm calling Appalachian State the best team, but it doesn't mean I'm going to necessarily be on them for the conference. And I have a small play. There's 2 teams, in my opinion, this year that's going to be in contention. That's Appalachian State and Troy. And both teams lost their coaches to bigger programs. Chip Lindsey went to West Virginia. Scott Satterfield went to Louisville. Both programs promoted their next guy up, right? Kind of that consistency, and that's a good thing. They returned both quarterbacks, a good amount of production. The conference is going to be settled the last game of the year, in my opinion, when Appalachian State goes to Troy this year. And I think that's the big thing. Looking at Troy at plus 600, Appalachian State going to Troy, I believe one of those teams are going to go face Arkansas State in the conference championship game, right? So I like the plus 600 with Troy, and you might get even money play on that by the end if you want to start hedging that. It's not like you're not going to be super excited to do that, but to counter that, I really like. I laid minus 135 on Appalachian State's win total over 9. I did. I think some of their tricky games are against Georgia Southern again, but they'll be a revenge game. That's the only game they lost in their conference last year. And at Troy, if you look at the rest of their schedule, Eastern Tennessee, I believe, is their first game. Charlotte, North Carolina is a little tricky, but I think they're better than North Carolina. Coastal Carolina's next. Yeah, I think Appalachian State goes over 9 pretty easily here. And so that could kind of make up for my Troy plus 600. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm looking at I'm looking at our FPI numbers on Appalachian State right now, and they give them a pretty good. Have them as underdogs only against the.
It was low. I look at the
North Carolina, South Carolina. So they got them favored in 10 games. So, I mean, they agree with you.
Yeah, and I also thought the FPI was a little low on Appalachian State. I thought it should be a little higher, but those things adjust quickly, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, knowing what goes into the Football Power Index and how it's calculated, I think that probably has to do with the coaching change. I think that would probably be the majority of it. I mean, you got your quarterback coming back, so that's obviously a huge deal and a really dominant defense. So I think it's more of a how's a new head coach going to do coming in and taking over the program. So I think that's probably the reason for the conservative 9-3 projection.
Yeah, absolutely. And Troy's season win total was at 7.5, and I believe it's still at plus 100. I think I'm going to take the over on that as well. They have a tricky game at Missouri, obviously, that they're going to lose. But they get Georgia Southern at home, and like I said, Appalachian State at home. And then, the rest of it's Campbell, at Akron. Come on. Those are 2 easy wins right there. And then they just got to get through their conference. We'll see about Louisiana. I don't know a lot about them, but they were pretty decent last year until they faced Appalachian State, but they had a nice little run there. So I think the 7.5 might be some money for Troy on this season over. But Chris, man, we went way over our time as usual, but I think that's just because we love talking football so much.
Exactly.
Thanks so much for coming on, though, my man. I'll be tweeting at you throughout the weekend games and through lines and everything. I can't wait to see you on College Game Day. You have a fantastic weekend. You do the same. Great talking to you. We'll talk to you again soon. All right, everyone. That was Chris Fallica, the Bear from ESPN College Game Day. I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend of college football coming up. Remember to get your proxy service in with Kelly Stewart in Vegas. And remember to go get some winners.